two tech titans, a billion-dollar alliance, but now rumors of betrayal, antitrust battles, and a fight for control.
From exclusive deals to secret AGI clauses.
Stick around. This is one corporate breakup you won't want to miss.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're hearing reports that tension between two of the biggest players in AI is, potentially reaching a boiling point. Even talk of executives discussing antitrust complaints. Today, we're really peeling back the layers on this exact story. The incredibly dynamic, and yes, sometimes contentious, relationship between OpenAI and Microsoft. We've gathered a whole stack of sources giving us a fascinating look into this powerful alliance, how it started, how it's evolving, and crucially, the friction points emerging right now.
That's right. And this isn't, just a simple corporate partnership story you read about every day. It's really a crucial case study. It shows how these collaborations are shaping and sometimes reshaping the entire AI industry as it innovates at breakneck speed. We're touching on everything from market structures to, potential regulatory hurdles down the line. So our mission in this deep dive is to pull out the most important insights from all these sources. We want you to really understand the key forces at play, and frankly, why this whole situation matters for the future of AI.
Okay, let's unpack how this all began based on what the sources tell us. The OpenAI-Microsoft relationship, it really kicks off back in 2019. That's when Microsoft made that significant initial investment, $1 billion.
$1 billion? Yeah. And as part of that deal, Microsoft also became OpenAI's exclusive cloud provider, everything running on Azure.
Huh.
And that setup? Well, even right from the start, it sparked some questions, even some early antitrust concerns about OpenAI's independence,
Uh-huh. Exclusivity can do that.
Exactly. And what's really fascinating here is how quickly things seem to have shifted, even from that initial exclusive setup. Our sources are indicating that, starting around June of 2024, the relationship began to gradually loosen up a bit.
Oof, okay.
And then a really pivotal moment seems to have happened on January 21st of this year, 2025. Microsoft announced a new phase for the partnership. Specifically, they changed the exclusivity model, but only for new compute capacity.
Right. They moved to what's called a right of first refusal model. This detail seems pretty telling. It means OpenAI can actually explore getting computing power from other places now. But if they need additional capacity, they first have to give Microsoft the chance to provide it on Azure.
First dibs, essentially.
Yeah, it's a significant step, isn't it? From being completely tied to Azure towards more of a, preferential access arrangement.
It is, and it immediately raises the question, what prompted this change? And why then specifically January 21st? Well, the sources point directly to OpenAI's own growing ambitions and actions. Because on that very same day, January 21st, 2025, OpenAI announced something huge, its participation in the Stargate project.
Ah yes, Stargate. This is that incredibly ambitious plan, right? Something like, $500 billion over the next 4 years.
A staggering amount, $500 billion.
Specifically to build massive new AI infrastructure, mainly in the US.
Yeah.
And while the announcement mentioned, it builds on the existing Microsoft partnership.
Which it does.
Stargate explicitly involves broader collaboration. Other major players are involved, like Oracle and NVIDIA. That clearly signals a strategic shift, doesn't it? OpenAI looking well beyond just Microsoft for its future computing needs.
Exactly. It really highlights the underlying dynamics that have been building. And interestingly, one source even put forward a pretty provocative claim. They suggested Microsoft effectively acquired OpenAI way back in 2021.
Acquired? Really?
That was the claim, yeah. Gaining access to IP, revenue sharing, API exclusivity through 2030. Now, it's important to say other sources frame it much more conventionally. A strategic partnership built through massive investments, like that multi-billion-dollar investment reported in 2023, which obviously increased Microsoft's leverage significantly.
Okay, so different perspectives on the nature of the control there.
Right? But the fact that the acquisition perspective exists in at least one source really underscores this perception of Microsoft's deep involvement and the potential control points it gained, which you can see how that could easily lead to friction as OpenAI seeks more autonomy and more independence.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, according to these reports. Despite this deep, evolving history, sources are reporting escalating tensions between the two companies. Some are even describing it as reaching a boiling point.
A boiling point, yeah, that's strong language.
And the friction isn't just about minor operational stuff. It seems it's apparently centered on fundamental questions, things like control over strategy, access to the IP developed together, and OpenAI's, growing desire for more independence as it gets bigger.
And our sources reveal these tensions have reportedly become so significant, it's just quite something, that OpenAI executives have actually discussed potentially filing antitrust complaints against Microsoft with regulators.
Wow. Filing complaints against their biggest partner and investor.
It signals a really serious level of concern from OpenAI's side, doesn't it? It suggests they might believe Microsoft has leveraged its dominant position as that key investor and partner to gain unfair competitive advantages, or maybe even to restrict OpenAI's ability to, compete freely, or pursue its own path.
So what specifically are these perceived unfair advantages? What are the main sticking points the sources mention?
Well, according to the sources, concerns have come up around how Microsoft integrates OpenAI's tech into its own products. Think GitHub Copilot, for instance. Is that integration giving Microsoft an unfair edge against OpenAI's own direct offerings? Or hurting OpenAI's ability to make deals elsewhere?
Yeah, competition within the partnership.
Precisely. There are also reported disagreements about OpenAI's freedom to partner with other cloud providers, maybe even for existing capacity, not just the new stuff under that right of first refusal. And a particularly critical point mentioned is potential disagreement over future access. Like what? Would Microsoft still get access to OpenAI's cutting-edge tech after its models are deemed to have hit AGI, artificial general intelligence?
Ah, the AGI clause. That's always been a background question.
A huge undefined milestone, yeah. Plus, our sources mention other disagreements. Like if OpenAI converts to a public benefit corporation structure, Microsoft apparently wants a bigger equity stake than OpenAI is maybe willing to give.
Okay, so fights over potential future structures too.
Seems like it, and there's even a specific dispute cited, something called the Windsurf acquisition dispute, apparently about IP access from some previous deal. These aren't just minor squabbles, are they? They point to a pretty fundamental clash over future direction, over the power balance in this supposed partnership.
Definitely sounds like it.
And if we zoom out a bit, connect this to the bigger picture, these specific Microsoft OpenAI dynamics aren't happening in a vacuum. Our sources suggest they actually highlight a potential blind spot in existing antitrust policy globally.
A blind spot? How so?
Well, current regulations often focus on traditional mergers, one company buying another, or cartels, where competitors illegally collude. They sometimes lack clear tools to really analyze these complex collaborations between firms that aren't quite mergers, aren't quite cartels, but still have huge market implications. What we might be seeing, according to some of these sources, isn't just a few isolated deals. It could be the emergence of a new kind of market structure, especially in highly innovative fields like AI.
A new market structure where collaboration is more the norm?
Potentially, yes. Collaboration becoming a prevalent feature, maybe even a necessity alongside competition.
So what does that actually look like? It kinda reminds me of the biotech industry back in the 90s. One source brought up that parallel. Back then, alliances between biotech firms shot up sharply, and the research apparently showed that firms less connected through these alliances actually grew slower. They called it a liability of disconnectedness.
That's a great point. It implies that in fields like AI, which moves so incredibly fast, collaboration might not just be helpful, it might be almost essential for growth, for staying at the cutting edge.
Right. You can't afford to be disconnected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, and here's the rub, the tension arises precisely because despite this necessary collaboration, Microsoft and OpenAI are increasingly bringing competing tools and services to market. Sources note, OpenAI is aggressively launching its own consumer tools, developing its APIs, striking its own enterprise deals.
Stuff that overlaps with Microsoft's offerings.
Directly overlaps in some cases. And Microsoft naturally isn't just sitting back and relying solely on OpenAI. They're actively hedging their bets. They're investing heavily in developing their own in-house AI models and frameworks. Sources mention things like AutoGen for orchestrating AI agents, KB-LAM for extending model knowledge, VidTalk for video processing.
So Microsoft is building its own alternative, reducing reliance.
That certainly seems to be part of the strategy, reducing that long-term dependency on an external partner, even one they've poured billions into.
And of course, it's not just these two duking it out, or collaborating, depending on how you look at it. Google is a massive player with its Gemini models, and they have that similar cloud partnership with Anthropic, right? Which has also drawn regulatory attention.
Yes, the Google-Anthropic deal is also under scrutiny, particularly in Europe, much like Microsoft OpenAI. Then you've got others emerging, like DeepSeek based in China, building their own LLMs, and Elon Musk's xAI with Grok. Those sources suggest Grok is still, relatively early days compared to the leaders.
It's early for Grok, yeah.
This whole complex environment really makes you question, as some sources touch upon, what's the main driver here? Is it always just about strategic advantage, making money, grabbing market share, getting stronger? Or is it about sticking to principles or the original goals of the collaboration?
Or maybe it's just more complicated than that.
It probably is. It seems like a mix, right? Strategic necessity in a field moving this fast, pure competitive drive, and
just the basic need for each company to operate effectively and secure its own future. I mean, from OpenAI's view, diversifying cloud partners, bringing in CoreWeave, Oracle, Google Cloud, as reported, that's just smart business for a large org, isn't it?
Yeah, it gives you leverage redundancy, avoids lock-in.
Exactly. Negotiate better deals. Don't get stuck on one provider's tech stack. And conversely, Microsoft's initial deep dependency on just OpenAI, that could naturally push them towards more self-reliance too.
So the outcome of all these tensions, whether they blow up into formal complaints or just simmer along as tough negotiations,
Yeah.
that's gonna have real impacts, right? On product roadmaps for both of them. And probably for the wider AI world.
Oh, absolutely. For OpenAI, if the relationship gets really strained, accessing those crucial Azure resources could become harder or more expensive. It might force them to accelerate building their own infrastructure or rely more on those other providers, which could be complex or costly.
And for Microsoft?
Well, it definitely influences how they integrate OpenAI's models into their key products. Azure AI services, GitHub Copilot, all that stuff. If there's uncertainty or friction, it could absolutely push Microsoft to speed up its own internal AI R&D even more to further reduce that reliance. Interesting. One source even floated the idea that maybe part of Microsoft's grand strategy here is to kind of let OpenAI burn cash and take the big risks on the frontier AI stuff.
Let them do the expensive, risky R&D.
And then Microsoft can build upon or integrate the successes later, perhaps more efficiently, As strategic patience, maybe?
That's a thought. And it's not just the companies involved who are watching this. You mentioned regulators earlier.
Yes. Regulatory bodies worldwide are paying very close attention. Antitrust watchdogs are actively scrutinizing these huge AI investments and partnerships. We know European authorities are already formally investigating both the Microsoft OpenAI and the Google Anthropic partnerships. They want to understand the competitive implications, potential market power issues.
And there was that mention in the sources about OpenAI winning a big contract with the U.S. Defense Department, too.
That's right, a $200 million contract to develop AI tools, which some observers note raises its own set of questions about military AI being developed by companies with such deep, complex ties to major tech platforms. Different set of concerns, but related to the overall influence.
Right? Separate but connected issues.
And this whole messy situation really highlights the challenge for regulators today. They're grappling with these new kinds of collaborations that don't fit old definitions. They're not simple mergers, not illegal cartels. They're something different. And the very possibility that OpenAI itself might file an antitrust complaint against its biggest backer, that just cranks up the pressure on regulators and could honestly significantly reshape the entire AI industry, depending on how it plays out.
So wrapping this up, our deep dive into the OpenAI-Microsoft relationship, it really paints a complex picture, doesn't it? We've got this partnership clearly evolving, definitely under significant tension, and it's all set against this backdrop of a rapidly shifting AI market, one that's somehow becoming more collaborative and yet still intensely competitive at the same time.
Both things are true.
We've seen how these power dynamics, the fights over control, IP independence, are creating real friction. It's drawing the eyes of regulators globally, and it's forcing these huge companies to constantly adjust their strategies, diversify, protect their own positions in this AI race.
And understanding these relationships, however complicated and tense they get, isn't just some industry inside baseball. It's actually key to grasping where AI development is heading next. It influences the products and services you'll use every day. It shapes the structure of the tech industry. It impacts the very nature of innovation in this critical field. It just seems like this constant, really delicate balancing act between the clear benefits of working together to push the boundaries and the intense pressures of competition in what could easily become a winner-take-most market.
So what really stands out to you from digging into all this? How do you think these complex partnerships, these internal tensions, this constant push and pull for independence, how will that shape the next waves of AI advancements we see? How might it impact the tools you use?
Well, here's something to really mull over. Building on that biotech analogy and the regulatory challenge, in an era where that liability of disconnectedness seems real, making these strategic alliances incredibly attractive, maybe even necessary for innovation, how will regulators adapt? How do you ensure fair competition thrives alongside the collaboration that might be needed to solve the really hard problems in fields like AI? Is this new market structure, if that's what it is, where collaboration is just part of the game, is it fundamentally different from what we've seen before? Does it need entirely new rules of engagement that, frankly, haven't even been written yet? That's the big question hanging over all of this.